Paperback Bookbinding 101. This is actually a rundown of my very first uh, attempt at doing a paperback book. Um, it was absolutely the simplest, most basic version of bookbinding you could possibly want to do. So I think pretty much anybody who even wants to give this a try could make this work. You don't have to spend a lot of money. You don't have to spend a lot of time. You may not get perfect results, but it was pretty satisfying for me to finish that first book. Now, traditionally, what I'd been doing was printing up books and and basically putting them in three-ring binders. So if I had an ebook that I wanted to print out, I put it in a three-ring binder after I printed it out front and back on a sheet of 8.5 by 11 paper. So left me with a pretty good sized book to carry around. Um, Here's the unbound pages of the one that I used in this example. So my basic bookbinding tools here for this project were pretty simple. You can see here, 2 paint stirring sticks, not too hard to come by, some Gorilla Glue. I don't recommend it. Matter of fact, since I've done a lot more experimenting, I've used PVA glues, which work slowly but very well. If you're going to do something similar to what I'm doing here, I recommend a 5-minute epoxy. Um, the project sets up very fast. It's good and stable, and it'll hold up. I used bookbinding clamps, or actually binder clamps, just office supplies. Actually, office supplies I got from my office at the time. Finished up with them, brought them back. Nothing fancy. This is a strip of sandpaper. You don't really need this, but at the time I figured it was something I was going to try. And then a couple of cotton swabs that I used to spread the glue around and basically keep my fingers from getting all full of glue. So you can see there's nothing fancy there. If you don't already have some of this stuff, it probably wouldn't spend more than $10 getting everything you see on the screen there. As I said, this was the book. You can see I had previously punched this with a hole punch to put into a book binder, or a binder cover, and so that's how I was carrying it around, a 1-inch binder. Big fat book, didn't particularly care for that. Um, and so I just took the pages out and figured if, worst case scenario, I just would mess up the book I'd already printed out. Here you can see it probably took the longest amount of time to actually get the pages lined up, get the paint sticks on both sides, kind of evenly spaced, and then get the clamps on there. That probably took more time than just about anything in the whole process, was just that first setup. In this picture here, you can also see right there, I've used the old 3-ring binder that I had this book in to function as a support, so I could kind of hang everything vertical for working on it. I took a couple of the clamps off the end, so I was basically working kind of half and half on the spine. And what I did at the time was I roughed up the edge of the sandpaper, or edge of the book with the sandpaper. There's a very slight gap you can see here, a little shadow. It's a very slight overlap where the book binding sticks out just a little ways past the end of the paint stirring sticks. And so I had that little gap. That way the glue wouldn't stick too badly to the sticks. I had a little bit of a gap there. But I sanded it up. The idea there is just to rough up the edge of the spine, kind of break up the paper fibers a little bit so the glue would soak in a little better. I haven't found that it makes a gigantic difference, but you can do it if you want to. Most professional bookbinding machines have some sort of a spine roughening tool on them that basically roughs them up before they apply the glue. So it's probably not the worst idea, but I haven't found it to be absolutely necessary in books that I've done since then. Once I had the spine roughed up, I basically just laid a bead of glue on there and made sure it soaked in. Now, Gorilla Glue, I don't recommend it. It made a really hard binding. Imagine over time it would crack pretty badly, so it's probably not a very durable binding, very inflexible. But the worst part of it was that it actually stains the paper brown. And if you try to put a paperback cover on it, it actually soaks through the paper and leaves you a brown edge. So it's not a real good glue for that, but it does set up hard. And another thing about Gorilla Glue is if you don't wipe off all the excess, it actually kind of foams up and bubbles up and creates kind of a puffy edge that hardens, so it doesn't give you a smooth edge either. So there's a lot of downsides to Gorilla Glue. The upside being, of course, that it was hard as a rock and it was impossible to get the pages out once I was done, but it was kind of tricky to work with. Once the edge is set up, you can see here on this very edge part here that the Gorilla Glue, the one good thing about it is it soaked into the edge of the paper and gave me a really good tight bond. It really got in there and soaked in along these edges. So that was the plus side. The downside, of course, being that it also stained those edges and gave you a brown edge. But you can see with a little bit of bumpiness, a little bit of pebbling on there, up in between the clamps. That was about the worst of it if you got all the excess glue wiped up. So it didn't bubble up too bad if you did that. Once I had that done, I glued a cover on the front and the back, and in this case I just got a piece of plastic cover, like a report cover plastic, and I glued it along the edge on the front, and I glued it along the edge on the back. I didn't try to do a paperback cover because I didn't have cardstock that would cover this whole space. That's a pretty good sized piece of cardstock. So I just covered it up with a clear coating, and then the last thing I did was ran a piece of heavy duty cloth tape all the way around the edge there, just to kind of cover over the brown edge and give a good tight secure seal on the front and the back of the cover there. And as you can see, once I was done, the pages held together pretty well, and it looks just as good as pretty much any paperback book that I've ever come across. So if you want to learn more about how to glue up your own paperback books, go and visit us at www.goeasybook.com. That's www.goeasybook.com.